Welcome back, everyone. I'm Stephen Foskett, your host for Cloud Field Day here in beautiful Santa Clara, California. It is wonderful being back in person for Field Day. We are thrilled to have a panel of delegates here in the room with us and a group of folks joining us from everywhere else. We're also thrilled to have a wonderful set of folks here in the room with us from NetApp to present. We've been working with NetApp for a long, long time. Those of you who are familiar with me know that I was actually one of NetApp's first customers, true story. I worked with Dave back in the 90s and was thrilled to be able to use one of the first toasters. And I've been following the company ever since. So it's great to have the new and completely different, dare I say, NetApp joining us here for Cloud Field Day 14. If you'd like to join the conversation, please do. You can head over to our LinkedIn page. So we are Tech Field Day on LinkedIn, and I know that NetApp would love for you to watch on NetApp TV and give some feedback in the NetApp channels as well. So please feel free to join them there. You can join the conversation on Twitter as well. Just use @NetApp and hashtag CFD14. We would love to hear from you. And if you're wondering how you can be part of Field Day in the future, how you can join the panel of delegates or present at a future Field Day event, well, you can just contact me. I am Stephen Foskett @SFoskett on Twitter. You can also go to techfieldday.com and apply there to become a delegate or a presenter. We love it when people do that. And I'm hoping that just saying that we'll have a couple people go ahead and submit their names because we love having new people join us. I'm going to actually embarrass one of those new people and call him out. Falco, thank you for being a first-time Field Day delegate. It's very nice to have you here around the table with us, and I'm glad that you were introduced to us so you can be part of this wonderful community.
Yeah, so my name is Falco Banaszak. I'm a consultant and solution architect out of Germany, so I flew like 12 hours just to the US, and I'm mainly focusing on BCM architectures, infrastructures, and yeah, I'm really happy to be here and see a lot of the Tech Field Day or Cloud Field Day presentations.
Great. Well, thank you for being part of this, and thanks for taking time out of your life to be part of this as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Phoebe and Team NetApp, and can't wait to hear what you got to say. So here you go.
Thanks so much, Stephen, and welcome everybody to Cloud Field Day 14, and we are NetApp. And I'm Phoebe Go, and I am a Principal Technical Evangelist at NetApp. And so before we start, just to get a sense of you and what your opinions are and what's going on in the world, I wanted to do a bit of an icebreaker and get to know you, because I feel like cloud is one of those conversations that has a lot of opinions and a lot of perspectives, and what better than to start with this room here and these delegates remotely. So firstly, grab your little emojis, or if you're remote, hold up a thumbs up or a thumbs down, happy face, sad face. And let me know, how do you feel about Cloud Field Day? I see thumbs ups. Yes, that's great. Party people, yes. Okay, that's an easy one. Or you can hold them upside down, yeah, if you want. All right, next one is that hybrid cloud makes enterprise IT more complex. I see a one, a thumbs up, a couple of thumbs up. Thinking faces, yeah, I'm glad that you say that, because we're going to cover some of this area definitely in our presentation. If I could, I'd automate everything. I would automate flying from Sydney to America if I could, so I don't have to think about it. Yep, the heads exploding, people smiling. I think secretly everybody wishes they could automate not just their enterprise IT, but everything in their lives. What about data protection isn't enough to fight ransomware? Oh, the crying face. I think that's true. I think it's sad that we even have to think about fighting ransomware. And that is one of the topics we'll be covering, because it is top of mind for everybody, the party people. Of course, yes. We know that data protection, and I know that definitely data protection has been a key topic, but ransomware is more than just data protection. hybrid cloud is for legacy workloads, not for innovation. Flip through that. What do you think? Thumbs down, neutral faces. Thinking face. Oh, I like this. We should explore this further. The upside down emojis. I think it's great. I really like to hear, definitely if you're engaging with us, and we're at NetApp, and I'm at Phoebe Go on Twitter. Please do, let me know what you think about this, because I'm torn on this. And finally, hang on a second. I'd like another coffee. Okay, let's get into it. Thinking about that. Maybe we don't have all the coffee drinkers in the room. All right, so just a quick recap. Who is NetApp? We are no strangers to change. We recently changed our logo from blue to black, so we understand change. But we don't care so much about the logo because we really care about building technologies, services, and systems that help our customers get the most out of their data. And it's some of these innovations that you may already know. We've built data management software, we've built storage trays, we've built cloud services, and in doing so, we've also partnered with some of the public cloud providers to actually deliver those services as first-party services in their environments as well. What you may not know is that NetApp also has over 20 cloud services and hybrid cloud services for data management, for data protection, to help manage data growth, to get visibility into the data that is sprawling across multiple cloud environments, to help our customers as they navigate the transition from VMs into containers and into more cloud native ways of developing. And across all of this, we are trying to build a seamless hybrid cloud experience that simplifies that overall adoption and consumption of all of these technologies. So we think of an experience as not just the process of building technologies and starting to build applications or migrating them, but the entire spectrum of procurement, of purchasing them, deploying them, and then implementing them and optimizing them, which is the most important last step as well, is getting the most out of that investment. And so today, we're going to hear from some fantastic speakers from NetApp who are going to cover the 3 pillars of hybrid cloud. Firstly, we're going to hear from Darnell, which is similar to what I did with the delegates in the room and the delegates remotely. We talked about what are the opinions, because we're not making these decisions based on what we think is happening in the world. We're making these decisions based on the data that we're collecting from customers, from our partners, and from the market as well. So Darnell is going to talk about what customers are actually doing, and I'd love to hear your opinions on that. She did not just poll people with emojis like I did. She actually did real research. And then we're going to hear from Chuck Foley. He's going to demonstrate this hybrid cloud simplicity experience. And I think that's really important to see not just what NetApp is saying, but what we are doing to invest in this area of building a simpler environment to operate your hybrid cloud. Then we'll segue a little bit into the dark side with Jason Blosel, who's going to talk about ransomware. So we call cyber resiliency the combination, the connection of data protection and data security. And he's going to explain how we come to that concept and all of the different pieces that make up the NetApp cyber resiliency story. And last but not least, we are joined by Susie Vishwanathan from VMware and AJ Mahanjan from NetApp, who are going to talk about the really exciting partnership that we have with VMware, and especially in helping our customers build, operate, and optimize their hybrid clouds. And I just have to make a shout out here that we can't do this without the partners in the world that we have worked with for such a long time, such as VMware, such as our system integrator partners, and of course, all the partners around the world who talk about and share our enthusiasm for helping our customers build hybrid clouds. And finally, of course, there's always time for Q&A. There's a section in the agenda, but please do put up your hands and ask these questions because our speakers do want to hear from you and I want to hear from you. So I really appreciate your time today. I'm going to hand over to Darnell and let's talk about hybrid cloud.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Actually, can I have this?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. This mic is working? All right, great. All right, well, we're going to go ahead. Wait a minute, where are we? I didn't even know what that was in there, but all right. So I think we're going to start this session with something that's probably a little bit different for you guys. I know that, you come here and you expect to hear like a lot of technology discussions. And before we get into that, I want to really dive a little bit deeper into, why are we doing what we're doing? You're going to see what we're doing, but, what's driving that? And I'm a marketing person, right? So I'm in the portfolio and product marketing group. And, one of the main things that we focus on is customer research. So, I want to help, I want to share with you guys, some of the insights and the trends that we're seeing so that, you can understand why it is that we're doing what we're doing. But I want to start with something that kind of inspired a new set of research that we just did. And it was actually in this forum. Stephen will be, pretty familiar with this. It was back in February on one of the on-premise IT roundtable podcasts. There was a panel who had a really interesting discussion. And, they talked about, is the traditional cloud dead? Is the hyper cloud more important than the cloud? And, Stephen defined the hyper cloud as a layer above the cloud that abstracts all the resources and allows you to build on them in a uniform way. So I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Let's see, let's do some new research and ask customers what they think about this. Well, so we did, and 83% of them said, yes, we agree with this panel. The hyper cloud will be part of our cloud evolution strategy in the next 3 years. So we said, okay, all right, that's really interesting. And, Enrico Signoretti, analyst from GigaOM, was in this panel too. And he said something that I really loved. And he said, what's happening is a revolution here. And we're seeing this and we're like, yeah, actually this really is a revolution. We've been looking at this for a long time. We do surveys of our customers, we poll them, we do interviews, we do, a lot of one-on-one conversations, we get customer stories, we publish some of those. But anyway, we see this trend. We see that not yet, just hybrid and multi-cloud, it just keeps growing. A research study that we did at the end of last year, so about like 6 months ago, we asked our customers, how do you plan to operate your architecture? 77% said that they plan to operate as a hybrid cloud for the foreseeable future. So this made sense to us. And, in this same survey, we asked them why, what's driving this? And they said, well, from a business perspective, it's the ability to innovate faster, hands down. And then also just from an operational perspective, it's about flexibility. It's about like being able to pivot quickly as your business needs change and, having the flexibility and the scale to be able to do that. So that's great. But then there were some other things, getting back to the panel discussion that sort of piqued our interest. And we said, well, let's go out and do, a study and ask more questions about things that, we're not really quite sure, and that this panel raised and sort of, made some assumptions, but we said, let's put some data to it because we wanted to find out, are the experts right in some of these assumptions, or, could they possibly be wrong? So let's ask. And one of the things that we found in this discussion, there was some debate, well, our customers really multi-cloud. I think a lot of them are really just starting out and they're just adopting, single clouds right now. Are they really multi-cloud? So we said, well, let's ask. So we went out, in this most recent survey that we did, which actually is going to be published any day now. And we worked with Gartner, the Pair Insights team, to do this. And what we found out was 93% of them said, yeah, we're using multiple public clouds. And we asked them, so help describe, help us understand how you're using hybrid. Are you on-prem with a single public cloud? And only 7% of them said, yeah. But 93% said, yep, we're multiple public clouds. And I think this is pretty understandable, right? Because this then gives them the ability to leverage a lot of different resources and the capabilities from different providers.
I have a question about the audience that was surveyed for this.
Yeah.
What types of companies and like where were they located? What size? I'm just curious what the demographic information is for the people surveyed.
Yep. So this was medium and large. It was cut across the globe. The majority of them, like 70% of them, were in the US. We had then about another 20% in EMEA and then 10% APAC. And it cut across different verticals.
Okay.
So, but something interesting here, and I know I'm sort of running out of time, so I have to get through this fast, but there is something interesting. So hold that thought for a second about the makeup of that. We also, found out from them, what kind of challenges are you facing with this? So, multi-cloud brings a lot of advantages to customers, but it introduces a lot of complexity, right? So we said, well, what are some of the issues? Interoperability, we heard, compatibility, lack of standardization creates a lot of operational headaches. So complexity was the key thing. There's different management tools. There are different data services, different workflows, inconsistent storage formats was a big one, which may require application refactoring. And we heard from customers, look, this just increases the operational chaos. And because of that, it also increases the cost. And not having visibility across all of these disparate environments, creates additional costs too, because you may have some resources that you don't even know that you have, or they're not being utilized to the best way that they could be. It also introduces security risks. So now you have multiple attack vectors in more surface areas. You have, no holistic visibility, which then just, creates an inconsistent approach to security, to data governance. And then this, they told us, look, this is leaving us vulnerable. And then the last bit here is just, lock-in. When you have different silos of data and infrastructure, that's stuck in separate locations, this makes it much more difficult to move data. So, portability problems, and data mobility then is limited. So, one of the things too, though, in the panel discussion, there was a lot of debate about, well, are customers even really moving data? What about data gravity? So we said, that's interesting too. Let's find out. Let's ask customers. And what we heard was, yeah, actually 90% said to us that, yeah, we're moving data and apps between clouds. And, this shows you the frequency. So most of them are, monthly, quarterly. But when it comes down to understanding, well, who are these customers? The question that you raised, we saw actually that manufacturing, finance, insurance, and banking, they're moving data more than some of the other verticals. And, it was kind of funny because this made sense to us. Because, if we look for examples within our own customer base, we see this. Aston Martin, their cognizant Formula One racing team said, we've got a really cool use case for moving data. We've got, compute instances on the track, and we're collecting a lot of data about the cars during races. We're sending that back to the factory. We're analyzing that data. We're then making decisions and telling drivers to do different things, so that they can compete better. So, in a case like this, when, seconds count, they're moving this data to make those decisions and to impact their ability to compete. And, we see this in other industries too. This was also Dow Jones. They're saying that, hey, we move data everywhere, and this is a game changer for us. It gives us flexibility, that we didn't have before. So it was interesting to see, people, they are moving data. Our customers, IT pros that aren't in our customer base, that are in this survey base, they're moving data. And one of the things that I actually thought was really interesting, and when we asked about the complexity and the challenges that customers had, a few times I heard this, that it's just, there's so much unknown. We're afraid of the unknown, and that's really limiting us from, taking risks and getting the benefits from those risks. So, we think about this and we think, yeah, you don't want the unknown in your IT environment, right? That's probably the last thing that you want. So I think, what we're hearing from customers is, hey, if you guys can give us a way to take that risk out, to make our experience more predictable, more compatible across these environments, more uniform. You know, going back to that idea of the hyper cloud, right? It's like about the uniform aspects that enable you to do things, you know, in a more consistent way, more predictable. So I think that's really, you know, what we're thinking about, and, you know, how do we do that and change, you know, the way we approach our services. So I think for us, it boils down to really three key things that you're going to be hearing, you know, throughout the day. Number one, it's about simplicity. How do we make things more simple for our customers? Customers, obviously, security, I think that's no surprise to anybody. Customers want things that are secure. They want to improve their security postures. And then the last thing here is flexibility. So again, a key driver for the hyper cloud, it's really about being able to have flexibility, to pivot quickly, and you know, to move at the speed that your business needs to move at. That's all I had. Does anybody have any questions before I hand it over to Chuck, who's going to take you into the simplicity aspects here and now really start to dive into the products and give you a demo? All right, cool. Here you go, Chuck.
Thank you, Darnell. So I'm Chuck Foley. I kind of oversee our product marketing efforts for our cloud business at NetApp, and make it simple, cut the cost, cut the risk. That is amazingly consistent with what we've heard with increasing volume and consistency and density over the past couple of years from our customers and our partners, who are becoming a really important part of our ecosystem. And so that drives conversations in NetApp about where do we want to put the velocity of our investments. And instead of going through a bunch of slides with you, I'm actually going to show you live the technology that we're investing in so you can see where we are today. We're not where we're going to be in 5 years, but we're in a really good place in our journey. I want you guys to see it, and I'd love to get some feedback from you on what you think about where we are. You'll hear me refer to Cloud Manager. Cloud Manager is a SaaS-delivered global control plane for all things storage and data management, not just from NetApp, but we're embracing the bigger hybrid multi-cloud picture. So we believe that you should be able to have a way to manage your data that is both secure, but also ubiquitous, that I can get at it anywhere, including a hotel room in Santa Clara, like we're in right now. So what if I went here and I said, okay, I want to go to cloudmanager.netapp.com. Now I happen to have credentials. And yes, I pre-signed in so that you guys didn't have to go through the multi-factor authentication process with me. But if I didn't, I would sign in with my credentials. I get MFA authorized, and I would see this. Now, what you see here is an actual environment. What do you notice? First, really intuitive, GUI driven, pretty simple, because what our customers are telling us is that they have teams that have to spread across all kinds of different environments, and they really don't have the time, effort, manpower, or money for, okay, you're the on-prem storage specialist, you're the on-prem backup specialist, you're the Azure infrastructure specialist, you're the Google infrastructure specialist. What you see here is resources that are existing in, oh, I'm sorry. It says you are screen sharing. So I apologize for the people online. Stop share, so I need to share a different screen, yes? Now, can one of my delegates online give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the Cloud Manager interface?
Yep, we can see it.
Good.
Thank you.
You didn't need that for the preamble, so perfect timing. Thank you, Phoebe. So what you see here is resources in Google, AWS, and Microsoft, truly a multi-cloud environment, but we're dealing largely with hybrid multi-cloud. So different skill sets, different people. What if I wanted to add an on-premise instance to this environment so that I have a real picture of my overall environment? I don't even have to know a lot about it. I'm going to put in an IP address here for one of the test environments. Hopefully I put in the, whoops, extra period. So what you see right there is idiot proof. I can't put in an incorrect environment. In seconds, I now have my on-prem NetApp data center server added to the same picture so that I can do things with it. That's a good step towards simplicity. How about if I take it even further? Now, bear with me, guys. I'm working off a laptop with the trackpad, mouse, etc. So what if I were to take this guy here and drag him down there because I want to I want to create a hybrid multi-cloud use case. I want to back up my data from my on-prem to my Amazon S3 account. Oh, by the way, did I note that that's an S3 account, not a NetApp account? It's other vendor storage that also can be accessed and leveraged and used here. So I say, I want to create this backup environment. What it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, I know you want to back it up to AWS. I'm going to go ahead and tag that because you dragged it to the AWS. I then enter anything specific that I want to put here. You don't see this. Yes, I know, it's a pretty common password. Never save it. Please don't beat me up about security, guys. This is a demo system. It can then say, all right, you've drag and dropped, you want to back up this on-prem system to your cloud system. What do you want to use for backup policies? I can create my own, but here's the good thing. I have already existing policies from my company on a role-based access control. It could even get where I can't create any policy. I have to use one of the defined policies and tell me which ones I got to use. So I'm going to use the first one here just because it's simple. Select next. It's going to say, which of the volumes do you want to back up? It's got 3 volumes on that on-prem system. Hey, it is backup. We probably ought to back up all of it. Guess what? I'm done. I just enabled backup from an on-prem system to an Amazon S3 account according to my company's policies. What did I not do? I didn't install backup software. I didn't spin up a backup server. I didn't have to install agents. And I did it across multiple environments. When I'm a guy that operates at a 6th grade reading level, I don't know a lot technically about these different environments. And now, to even make sure, I now have it where I can see graphically what relationships exist between my environments. Now, what if I wanted to get more complex? Some of you guys, when you start dealing with cloud stuff, you know that if you want to say, I want to go spin up a cloud environment because the DevOps team has told me that they need a cloud-based file server environment for dev test. And they need to be able to move data back and forth from production into dev test. And I'm thinking, I don't know about VMs. Amazon calls them an M4X large. Azure calls it a DSV3. Do I want to use HDD, SDD, premium SDD of what size, ST1 or PC1? It can blow your mind if you really don't live that world. So you know what? We're going to make it really simple with automation, integration, and AI and ML. First, I'm going to give my working environment a name, CFD14. It's already got my user ID in there. I'll put in my passwords. Yes, they match. Again, idiot proof. And it says, what services do you want to enable? Now, I actually have admin level because if I was a standard user level, it doesn't even have to show me those. It'll apply what services on a policy basis are needed. I'm going to turn these off for now, simply because I want to show you how easy it is to turn them on later. But notice something, as I'm turning these services off, saying I don't want to turn on automatic backup and monitoring, it's capturing why. That's important to us. Our customers' experience and what's important to them is important to us. We're going to capture that to help us give a better product, and the customer can see which ones were turned off in their environment by who and why. So it says, okay, you chose Azure. You want to spin up a single instance in Azure. I can select an availability zone, a VNet, a subnet. Yes, that's the configuration environment that I want. I can use an existing resource group or generate a new one. I'm going to generate a new resource group, but choose an existing security group. Whoops. That name's already being used by somebody else. So I'll create my new one. Now I can choose which charging method. Again, I have admin rights. I can choose any charging method. I can have these present only the ones that are available. For this demo, I'm going to choose the freemium. Here's why. Up to 500 gig, unlimited feature set of ONTAP in the cloud, unlimited term. This isn't a term. It's not a demo or a trial. It's a real instance. But when you talk dev test or even some Kubernetes environments where I just need a little bit of storage for a while, what's the average container lifespan? Sometimes as short as 10 seconds, 30 seconds. It's nice to be able to have an enterprise class storage that I can spin up, use, and go away. So I'm going to use that one. Now, again, what I say before, a 6th grade reading level, I don't know about different storage types and VM types. So it has built predefined sizes for me. Is this a POC and a small workload using premium SSD? Or is this maybe a cost-effective DR using standard SSD and a smaller VM? I'm going to choose that one because that's what I articulated to you guys before. I do need to create a volume. So I'm going to call it volume 1. Let's make it 300 gig. Choose my default policies. Yes, it has storage efficiencies turned on for compression, dedupe, and tiering, so I don't waste the company's money. It says, all right, are you sure this is what you want to do? I say, yep, that's what I want to do. I checked everything out. I hit OK. It will go set up that environment for me. I don't know how to set up an Azure VM, hang Azure managed disk of the right type, create different aggregates and RAID groups and apply the protections and set it up with the right networking resources. That's all done under the covers for me using automation. Makes my life a lot easier. The other thing that it does, it means we can take a certain skill set in our customers that know high-level concepts, and they can apply this to all the different environments that they need to do. So what it's going to do is that's going to go and spin up those resources for me in Azure. I'm done, however. What did that take me? 3 minutes? Maybe 4 minutes? And I was explaining. If I wasn't explaining, it was about 2 minutes. I had a conversation on Monday of this week with an SRE, a lead SRE for a fintech company, who said, yeah, it takes about a little more than a half a man hour. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes of a guy working at a keyboard to take all of the infrastructure options for the VMs and the storage, et cetera, and set it up in the cloud and make that all work. While that does that, I can say, what other services are available to me that I want to take a look at? Because I want to shift from reduction in cost and risk for a minute and show you some other things. FinOps is a persona set in our customers' environments that are really putting a lot of pressure on the IT ops and the cloud ops people. They say, hey, don't waste stuff. What are you using and why? So we've created this concept of a digital wallet in Cloud Manager. The digital wallet shows you all of the entitlements you have, the data and data management resources, where they are, if they're being used or not. So for example, the Cloud Volumes ONTAP licenses that I just spun one up in the cloud for free, so that doesn't need to be in the wallet because that's free. I can go into here and say, show me all of the licenses that I currently have that may or may not be being used. Now, understand we're on a demo system. There is some latency and delay, so you have that, but that's going to go poll the systems and come back and show me the licenses that I have. I could also go over, whoops, let me refresh that. I could also go over and say, if I wanted to support my SecOps people, maybe I want to go and say, I want to show my ransomware protection dashboard. And it will go and build a picture of where I am from a cyber threat standpoint in my enterprise. It'll show me which environments I have that maybe are unprotected, or I have data that is exposed because I have exposed permissions, or maybe I have classified data in a public environment. You're seeing all things like that. It'll even go build a set of pictures, and it's actually polling the environment, so I'll have to show you about where I have things like users accessing data right now that's outside of a standard or a norm. So it's using AI to look at autonomous generation of activity. Sorry for the network delay, guys. We are in a hotel in Santa Clara. So what we've done is we brought together live, real-time, on-premise resources, cloud-based resources from all the different clouds, the ability to provision infrastructure, the ability to have it serviced on a workload by workload basis, and even provide role-based access between FinOps, IT ops, and SecOps. So one of the key areas was a question.
Yeah, I have a question regarding, the UI is cool, especially when I'm doing anything in the cloud for the first time. I do like to interact through the UI to take it for a spin, see what the options are, figure things out. But then the next time I want to do it, because I am a terrible typist, I make mistakes all the time. What I really want is to be able to automate that process. Mm-hmm. So what are the automation options that snap into Cloud Manager?
So you can use Ansible playbooks, for example. There is a concept called application templates, where in Cloud Manager you can create application templates that will automate these things. Like if DevOps wants something, its infrastructure as code, we participate in that. But then Terraform and Ansible, also, if you're using those, mm-hmm. you can enable those through this process as well.
Okay.
Really helpful, for instance, in the Kubernetes environments where these things are coming and going really fast. And since we're a player in that world with our Astra Trident CSI that has been out there for years, thousands of customers in the world using that to use ONTAP for persistent storage. This CBO instance, especially with the new freemium pricing tier, free up to 500 gig, that's a great fit for those kind of workloads. So I'm going to turn, I only have a few minutes left, so I have to turn it over to my counterpart, Jason Blazel, to talk about what we're doing from a cyber resilience standpoint, because that's the other key persona that we're dealing with here, that being FinOps, ITOps, and now the SecOps team. So Jason, I'm going to flip it over to you so you can walk them into that. You're going to have to go back and share the presentation.
All right. But there's the third one from the right, left.
Right there. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, and thanks, Chuck. Thank you all. My name is Jason Blossel. I'm a principal marketing strategist at NetApp, and next slide. There we go. I want to talk about cyber resilience, essentially how NetApp is addressing the challenges of data protection and data security. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise to any of you that one of the key stresses of executives is cyber threats. According to Allianz, published this year, it's the #1 problem keeping executives awake at night. And the top 2 challenges are ransomware and data breaches. And there's a good reason why. I mean, these are really expensive problems to solve. According to Sophos, the average cost to remediate a ransomware attack is over $1.8 million. And that was up over the prior year of about $780,000. So the cost to remediate these challenges is really high. In fact, in most cases, it's about 10 times the cost of a ransom that's being requested. Now, based upon some primary research that we've done that we'll be publishing in the coming weeks, we've found that most customers or most organizations are using backup and recovery as the primary tool to protect and recover against ransomware attacks. And that's followed closely by user behavior analytics. Now, according to this research here from Veeam published last year, I found it interesting that 1/3 of backups and 1/3 of restorers fail. That was pretty high. I wasn't expecting that number. But what that means is that if we're relying on backup and recovery as our primary protection, then we need a better solution than having 2/3 of them actually succeeding. Now, what are hackers looking for, right? They're after data, right? They want to steal it, they want to encrypt it, they want to delete it, they want to do whatever they can to limit the use of data in order to extort money to get that data back. But sadly, only about 8% of data that actually tries to recover from ransomware attacks, even with a key, is fully successful. So it's really kind of risky, and whether even if you pay a ransom, whether you're going to get all of your data back. Now, we look at data protection and security as kind of a data-centric approach to this. And I like to think about it in terms of like the automotive sector. So I spent 5 years in the automotive business. And when you think about safety and security technologies in cars, they're really focused around the occupant, the passenger, right? They're the most important asset that's inside of that vehicle. Things like airbags and seat belts and side impact beams and even analog brakes and blind spot detection. All of these technologies are designed to protect the occupant or passenger or occupants outside in other cars or walking across crosswalks and things like that. And we look at it in the same way, that data is the most important asset within an organization. And so we take this data-centric approach to protecting and security, using zero trust as our design principle. So looking from the inside out, starting with the data and then moving out. Now, you may be saying that NetApp's not really a security company, and traditionally, that's true. We're not in the traditional sense a data security company or a security company in general. But I like to think of Lee Corso, right, with the not so fast, my friend, when he's on college game day on Saturday mornings. We are actually quite experts in data security, especially as it sits on the storage and on the disk that we sell. In fact, we're the only enterprise storage company that's been validated for top secret data, and that's proven by this top one here, commercial solutions for classified component lists. This is fairly new, but NetApp is the only enterprise storage vendor listed and validated to store data for the NSA. Followed by additional certifications with the Department of Defense and common criteria. But data security is only a portion of this cybersecurity, cyber threat conversation. Data protection is also part of that. And as I mentioned earlier, that most users are relying on backup and recovery to deal with ransomware and cybersecurity threats. Now, NetApp makes it easy for our customers. We've built in snapshot-based technology for decades into our products, and those technologies are used to rapidly create copies of data for the use of recovery. All for One Group is an IT consultant firm in Germany, and they take 5,000 copies a day, each one lasting about 23 seconds. Now that dramatically removes the obstacle of backups, especially the backup time that's required or backup windows that most organizations have. It also means that they can take backups much more frequently, reducing the recovery point by which they recover their data. Now, within our integrated data protection, we also retain the data efficiencies of the primary storage as it moves to secondary storage for secondary copies, and that means dramatic cost reductions. In this particular case, Cone Health migrated their data protection to Azure for disaster recovery. And in that process of using NetApp technology, they've discovered that they achieve about $1 million worth of annual savings. And then finally, what's a backup if it's not for recovery? In this particular case, Be The Match, they're a bone marrow matching service, and they use NetApp technology, and they've been able to reduce the recovery time from multiple hours to under 15 minutes. And effectively, that essentially keeps them uptime 24/7 without the worry of having to have a lot of downtime, which is the predominant cost associated with remediating ransomware attacks. So as I mentioned, NetApp is looking at data protection and data security from a holistic approach. We call this cyber resilience. And so we're protecting against things like natural disasters, human error, accidental data loss, but also cyber threats like ransomware, even data governance and compliance issues. We bucket into this cyber resilience story. And what's unique about what NetApp does is that we're not just focused on the secondary storage. Most of the conversation around ransomware today in cybersecurity is on the secondary storage. At least most of the vendors out there, the backup vendors, are traditionally focused on being able to recover once an incident has already happened. And I joke about this a little bit. I don't know if it's very funny, but I thought it was kind of funny, which is we're trying to keep the wolves from getting into the hen house. Others are trying to take the chickens out of the wolf's mouth. And so if NetApp is focusing not only on the secondary storage, but also on primary and delivering technologies that enable the prevention and not only the recovery of data. So let's look at what our portfolio is. So our portfolio consists of multiple layers. And if you think about your own home, or you think about your car, or maybe even a museum, there's going to be multiple layers of protection and security that are required to address the various attack vectors that Darnell talked about earlier. The foundation of this is built on NetApp ONTAP. And ONTAP can be delivered as engineered systems in a data center. It can be delivered as software-defined storage, either in the data center or in the public cloud. Chuck talked a little bit about Cloud Volumes ONTAP. It can also be delivered as a fully managed service. FSx for NetApp ONTAP is an example. Azure NetApp Files is another example. Fully managed services delivered, deployed, purchased, and supported through a hyperscaler. We build off that and then add on to it the ability to back up data efficiently using native technologies that effectively move data using block-based movement and retaining the data efficiencies to either another ONTAP device or to an object storage. On top of that, we have data discovery and classification technologies. In this particular case, Cloud Data Sense allows us to look across all data repositories, whether they be in the cloud, on-prem, NetApp storage, non-NetApp storage, file, object, or even databases, to discover who has access, what type of data is it, who has permissions, and is it sensitive data, and where it's located. And finally, we have the ability to look across the infrastructure to see the performance of the infrastructure, to see who has access, what types of user behavior are we monitoring, to see if there's any potential threats. All of this is managed through this global management plane, which Chuck has discussed and given us a demo for. Now, what I'd like to do is walk through the capabilities that we offer. You'll see in this slide here, we have the NIST cybersecurity framework here of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. We've simplified it to protect, detect, and recover. We're seeing that common in the market right now. And actually, Phoebe and I were talking about this earlier this morning about what would be kind of an analogous conversation that we'd have, and it might be around like a museum. You're going to protect the jewels, you're going to protect the paintings, and what is it that you're planning to do? Well, if I were in charge of security, I'd want to know what things I have, right? What's the most valuable? What's the least valuable? I'll put my most valuable in certain rooms. I'll only have certain access to those things that are most valuable. I'll have different types of security that I'll apply to it. I'll be able to detect the intruders that are trying to steal that. I'll be able to respond by locking gates or whatever the Mission Impossible films will show us as the latest technology for protecting against theft. And then I'll want to understand what went wrong if someone did steal something, be able to do some forensics, and then be able to get us back in place where we can now take in customers again into that museum. And so NetApp offers these technologies as it relates to the data. So first of all, it's important to understand what kind of data I have. Where is it located? Who has access to it? Is it sensitive data? Am I going to back up social security numbers or credit cards? I don't want to do that. So I need to know what kind of data I have before I start applying permission or protection technologies against that. I also want to look at my cloud hygiene and understand what the infrastructure looks like and is it secure. I then move into this protection side of it, right? So I want to have efficient copy management. With NetApp, we can take immutable snapshot copies of our data. They're read-only. They can't be changed, but they can be deleted. And because they can be deleted, we have other technologies. SnapLock, which is a feature built into ONTAP, allows us to apply worm file locking to prevent the deletion and manipulation of data. We also offer efficient movement of the data through SnapMirror, which is another embedded feature of NetApp ONTAP, which uses block-based replication to efficiently move data between endpoints. We also apply malicious file blocking. Malicious file blocking, F-policy is a feature within ONTAP, and ONTAP includes a database of known malicious file extensions. And so before data is even written to the primary storage, we're already comparing that against our database of known bad file extensions to block them from coming to disk. And then we've just added a new feature just last month, 9.11.1 of ONTAP, which is to address insider threat prevention. What we do is that instead of a single admin account being able to perform certain critical tasks like deleting of snapshots, creating of volumes, or even creating user accounts, we require more than one admin account to be able to do that. And so this prevents the possibility of a rogue admin going and causing a bunch of havoc within the data storage. It also prevents the possibility of compromised credentials of an admin account. I read recently in the Wall Street Journal about a company that had a ransomware event, and it turns out that the vulnerability was an admin account that had a password that hadn't been changed for 8 years. So imagine being able to have the ability to block just a single admin from coming in and deleting data and causing havoc. That's what this multi-admin verify feature within ONTAP provides.
Quick question on that, because it sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Is the idea that then two admins need to log in the same time, like in the old movies, the two keys to launch the missiles? Is that?
It's funny you mentioned that because I had a slide that showed the two keys and I took that out. An admin can perform a number of functions, but there's a preset number of functions that are critical to behavior that we require. And it's really up to the organization to be able to set that up. But once that's set up, then it requires multiple admins to perform these key functions, including the creation of admin accounts. Because that came up the other day. Someone was saying, well, couldn't an admin create another admin account and then control that?
Right.
But there's a fence for that as well. To create an additional account, two admin accounts have to be able to approve that.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you for the question. We now get into detection. With ONTAP, we can alert to a number of different anomalies within the storage. Things like snapshot reserve space that's increasing, the loss of efficiency, these things which might be indicative of encrypted data, which cannot be deduplicated or compressed. We also look at on-box ransomware detection. This is a new feature that we added last fall. And what ONTAP does is it starts to look at the file system, and we apply machine learning so that it can discover how the file system operates over a period of time. And then as we take it into active mode, then ONTAP automatically looks at data entropy across that file system to determine whether there is a potential threat. And then it immediately kicks off a snapshot as a recovery point, and then alerts the users that there's a potential problem. I'm actually going to demonstrate a little bit about that in a demo. And then finally, we have integration with antivirus software companies through vScan.
Can I ask a question at
Please.
this point? So you're obviously protecting the data, and machine learning hopefully detects all malicious attempts or
Sure.
ransomware presence, and it has its own ways. So for example, it detects something. Does it act in the way to say, it's not just a snapshot and says, okay, ransomware probably didn't exist back then, because part of the reason is when you detect ransomware, then you don't know how far back to go before everything is clean. So that's one thing. And the other is, are you doing something to, in the meantime, prevent data exfiltration in the meantime, so that you don't lose anything if there is ransomware and data being extracted out?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, the next green topic here on user behavior analytics is a part of that answer. But let me answer the first one, which is the on-box ransomware detection. So we typically have about a 30-day learning cycle for ONTAP to see what normal file system behavior is. And then from that point, when you turn on the active mode, it'll start comparing it against that 30-day window. If it's longer than that, obviously it's not going to be detecting whether a ransomware file was written, but it is going to start looking at the anomalous behavior and whether ransomware is actually taking effect. As it relates to the second question you had around user behavior analytics, so Cloud Insights has a feature within it called Cloud Secure, and it looks at the user access of the storage. So while the ONTAP is looking across the total file system, it might look for things like slow-moving encryption or slow-moving malware. It could also look across multiple user accounts that are accessing the whole file system. With Cloud Secure, what it's looking at is each user account to see, is someone doing something they haven't normally done? And so we keep about 30 months within our database of the user activity of that storage to identify user accounts that might be doing something strange. You know, why is Sally in HR suddenly accessing engineering files, or why is Bob in marketing grabbing financial records that he normally doesn't access? And in that process, we'll then create a snapshot as a recovery point, but we can also automatically block the user from accessing the storage even further. And we don't go through Active Directory because there's a direct interaction with Cloud Secure and in the ONTAP system, we can stop the access immediately. And so that would prevent further data exfiltration as a possible remediation.
Right, okay, thank you.
So I want to go back to one of the points that Arthur mentioned and get a definitive answer from that around, like, you have the ability to say, hey, we noticed something happened, so we stopped it, but you may want to go back to this point in time. Is that where you said that you could take a snapshot and you could say, hey, go back to the snapshot because this is where we think it was clean? Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, and I'll show you in the demo, but effectively, we don't have the technology today to go back to to identify a clean snapshot. We rely on some of our partners like ProLion and Cleandros with CryptoSpike. Those are pursuits that we're developing.
Okay.
But what it will do is it'll notice the anomalous behavior and then take remediation immediately in order to prevent further damage.
Yeah.
So the recovery point is to minimize the amount of data that you need to recover.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. We can also detect things like mass deletion of data as well. And then I mentioned the automated threat response. As it relates to the recovery of data, because our snapshots are essentially just pointers to shared data, and because our data movement is the changed data blocks or the bits, we're moving a lot less data, and so our recovery times are a lot faster. But what also supports that is the understanding of what kind of data we have. So as I mentioned up front, the identification of data is critical because it not only identifies what data I want to protect, but it also helps us in a forensic analysis to know what data I want to recover. So as I mentioned before, right, downtime is the biggest cost associated with ransomware attacks. And so the faster we can get an organization back up and running, the better. And some people may say, well, gee, I don't want to get back up and running because we might have a problem with additional ransomware. Other people believe that, well, if I can get us up fast, then at least my business can operate, and then I can take rapid clones of that data and then do the forensics to try to understand the source of that threat. So there's kind of competing philosophies on what's appropriate. Now, Chuck mentioned also ransom protection dashboard. I just want to mention it here. We didn't have a chance to demo that fully. This is currently in beta, but essentially we're gathering data from all kinds of sources, right? So not only ONTAP, but we're using ActiveIQ, which is kind of our data intelligence database of all the users as they feed information back and call home. We aggregate that data. Also DataSense and Cloud Insights and Cloud Backup. And so we're gathering information to provide a single view of a security posture of an organization, and then be able to dive into each one of those widgets to better understand what's going on. Why does this folder have public permissions when it has sensitive data in it? and we'd be able to provide that information for users to be able to protect their data more effectively.
Hi there. Can you tell me just a little? Sorry. Yeah, I'm afar. I'm not on-prem. Can you tell us a little bit more about DataSense? Is this new? Did it used to have a different name? Has it been around for a while and I've just not heard that term?
Yeah, we acquired a company 2-3 years ago called Nago, and we initially released the product as Cloud Compliance. Yeah, so we found that more of the use cases that people were looking at with that product were more around governance and data stewardship. And so we moved the name to be more aligned with that use case. But within DataSense, it not only looks at the kind of data, but it also compares it against things like HIPAA requirements and others, and you can provide reports on whether you're compliant.
That's great. I think it's a much better name because it says data and it's sensible. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Forgot people were down there. I've kind of threw me off there. All right.
I got a question as well. Just very quick. Do you have some sort of, let's say, remediation actions as well out of the dashboard, or is it just showing you, that, for example, your files are encrypted here and you get problems there?
Yeah, initially it's more of a reporting mechanism. There's a vision for how we might engage with remediation activities, but we do have the ability from the automated standpoint of autonomously creating snapshots and blocking users through other tools like within ONTAP as well as Cloud Insights.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Now I think I have just a couple more minutes. Oh, I'm good. Okay. I wanted to just show a quick demo of how Cloud Insights works, a cloud secure feature, and then also how the autonomous ransomware protection works. That's not what I wanted. All right, let me see if I can find, oh, here it is. All right, so let me pause here and go back. Let me set the stage here. So Cloud Insights, as I mentioned, is a SaaS-based service, and it can look across any storage, infrastructure, cloud, on-prem. It's super, super powerful as a data monitoring and reporting platform. But we've built into it this ability to monitor user behavior analytics, and that's fed through a feature within ONTAP called F-Policy. So it can actually look at who's looking at what, who's touching it, what they did, and provides a lot of intelligence for us. So this first part of the demo is going to be how Cloud Secure looks at user behavior anomalies and then what it does to then protect against that. The second part of the demo is going to be this machine learning capability that's built into ONTAP, and you can see how that works. Most of what works actually is not visible, so what we'll be looking at is the UIs for each of these. All right, so we'll start off here. And what you see is, how did that happen? Okay, there we go, sorry. So what you'll see here after we log in is there've been a number of ransomware attacks. And so we can click on any one of these ransomware attacks, and we'll see that this particular one happened about 12 hours ago. And the action that was taken was an automated snapshot. What's that? Well, this is the MP4. It's just every time I touch it, it goes to the next slide. All right, so 12 hours ago, snapshot was taken, and now we can also see what, so 555 encrypted files. We can see that the extension was EZZ, was added to each file as part of that ransomware attack. We can see the user who was compromised with that ransomware attack, and even their manager. So if we want to go back and talk with them, we can then say, hey, guess what, you got attacked. And then we can also see common paths that might be indicative of that ransomware propagating into other areas by this particular user. And so Cloud Secure provides us that information. Now, this next feature is the autonomous ransomware feature, which is built into ONTAP. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to enable this feature. This is fun. So we put on learning mode now, and I'm just going to let this run out, and I'll try to speak faster. So we'll look at Explorer, we're going to look at the volume, we're going to see the kind of data there. So there's PDFs, JPEGs, PNG files. And once we think that it's learned enough, we're going to put it in active mode. And so now it's in active mode, and we're going to simulate an attack here. And what we're going to do is we're going to encrypt the data and add an extension of LCKD to the file extension. Now, when we go and take a look at the suspected file types, we can see that this LCKD indeed was added and that the threat was identified. And what we did is we took an automatic snapshot once we identified that that threat was there. So if we go into Explorer, we can see that within the file directory, indeed, all these files have this LCKD extension. And it's not just looking for the extensions, it's actually looking at data entropy and trying to find out what changes are happening. That just happened to be the evidence of that. As I mentioned, we took a snapshot copy. So now we're going to restore everything from this snapshot copy. We click restore, and literally within minutes, we can restore terabytes of data. And so it's super, super fast, and we can get the data back up and running. And now as we look at the directory again, we can see that all the files have been restored to their former status.
Okay, a question.
Yeah, please.
So it gets restored. Does it also do something to that user saying that, yeah, we fixed the data, but something happened why the data was compromised. So you block the user as well and then find what went wrong that introduced the ransomware or encrypted the data? Because until you fix a problem, it's the same way that, you find a short circuit, you don't switch on the circuit breaker until you fix the problem.
Yeah.
Are you doing something like that?
So there isn't necessarily an automated forensics, but within Cloud Insights and Cloud Data Sense, we can go in and take a look at every file and every user to see what actually changed, when it changed, what they did to it. And so it helps us to understand that if we can map that back to when we detected the threat, we can then see the files that changed at that time. And then we can apply that to the remediation actions beyond just the snapshot and the recovery.
Right. And another thing that I just wanted to ask was that, say, for example, Pally and HR, for example, got compromised and things started encrypting. But sometimes malware can actually start sending things out. Again, data exfiltration starts happening before. If encryption or data getting encrypted is the only thing that's detecting it, then you might already have the data sent out before the AI kicks in.
Yeah.
So is that the only logic, or are there other things as well that actually determine if the user is compromised?
Yeah, so there's a number of different factors by which we measure user behavior anomalies, right? One of them would be mass deletion. Another one could be reading and writing of data that might be indicative of reading lots of data, encrypting it. It might be accessing folders that they normally don't access. It could be mass reads, which might be indicative of someone reading it and putting it on a USB drive. So all those are possible reasons why we would create a snapshot and then block the user from further access.
And I agree. I mean, a lot of those indications would be someone doing something different, right? But that's not necessarily true. I mean, whoever is creating that kind of malware could actually, it would be that whatever the normal access of that user is, we just send that data across. Especially if it's a high profile user, then obviously their data will also be, not necessarily just so that it doesn't sound alarm bells.
Or if it's done incrementally over a period of days, right?
Exactly.
That's
Trickle
more difficult to
sending out.
detect.
Exactly.
Anomalous behavior, yeah.
So are we catching those kind of things as well? Because they will be definitely useful, because otherwise you could possibly miss that ransomware being installed and data will already be compromised.
I mean, it's a good question. And honestly, I don't know how we would ever detect intent, right? Because that plays a little bit more to intent. Like if someone just says, I'm going to copy this file today, and then next week I'll copy another file, and they may plan their nefarious activities over 6 months. I don't know how we automatically would be able to detect something like that. But you're asking a really good question.
Maybe, just if they're sending data outside, through a gateway, something like that, you start monitoring that as well, maybe. But again, I digress.
No,
sorry.
That's all right.
But, I mean, that's a question that came to mind, so I thought I should ask.
I'd love to discuss that with you, perhaps offline a little
Yeah,
more.
of course.
It looks like I'm out of time. I think 0 hit like a minute ago. What am I doing? Okay. So thank you. And I think I'm now going to turn the time over to my colleague, AJ Mahajan. AJ, take it over.
Okay, I'm Ajay Mahajan with NetApp. I manage our solutions team where we work on solutions with all of NetApp technologies as well as our partners and our hyperscalers and various things that happen across all of those, as well as, of course, our customers. With me today is Suzy Vishwanathan from VMware, and she manages VMware Cloud Services products. So as we walk you through today as to simple, secure, flexible, so how all these things come together and what NetApp and VMware have been doing together and what really started that and how far we have come, and then walk you through a demo of how that works together. So one of the things when Darnell was explaining all of the customer research and the surveys we have done, the panel reviews, so one of the things that came out was all of these customers, they look at the complexity, but they also look at going to multiple clouds, working from their on-prem data centers. So what we see here is with VMware and NetApp. So we've been working together for 20 plus years, and customers have been running on-prem workloads in data centers that they have spent last 15 years setting up, making those work seamlessly. And then as we get into Kubernetes and container-based applications, then how do you use that infrastructure while running the container-based workloads? And then as cloud has come upfront, where now, how do you scale to cloud? How do you run workloads in cloud? And how do you do it cost effectively? So as we go through these customers, what we see really is they are in various stages of this journey. So some are, and they could be doing multiple things with it, one or more things. So one is, how do I optimize my current investments in my on-premises data centers and virtualized infrastructure? So not only we get that to do more workloads at a higher performance, at a different scale, how do we take costs out of that? At the same time, how do we respond to container-based Kubernetes workloads and deploy those? There, the speed is very important, and manage those. And many of these are stateful workloads with persistent storage underneath. And then as cloud gets involved, that people who were either running workloads that are now running in cloud, so it's lift and shift. Sometimes it's cloud native workloads. Sometimes they were doing disaster recovery to two different data centers. So now instead of going to that second data center, how do we do that to an environment in cloud? So the challenge here is customers want to run all of this on an integrated platform, and they want to run any workload in any location. So the challenge is there is no single platform in the industry that enables all of this. And that's where VMware and NetApp partner together so that actually there is a unified platform where all of these things can run together in a seamless and a consistent manner, and also be flexible and simple without adding way too much complexity. So there are certain challenges as these customers start using cloud for running these workloads. So how do you deal with those challenges? So that's a really big question. And Suzy is gonna elaborate on some of these things that, hey, there is compute involved, there is capacity involved, there is performance involved, and how do you scale all these things together?
So just a quick introduction on who I am. I run VMware Cloud Services at VMware. We have two sorts of offerings actually. One that is a managed service, which is where we partner with AWS and with partners such as NetApp. And then we do have our multi-cloud story with all the other hyperscalers, which includes Azure, GCP. This particular aspect that AJ is elaborating on is how we have come together with NetApp offering the storage aspects, VMware offering the cloud services aspects, and both being run on AWS. So it's actually a three-way partnership. And one of the things, and just a bit of a background on where we started, and then I'll talk about this particular slide. So for about 4 years ago, VMware partnered with AWS, and we said that we wanted to give a managed offering while taking advantage of the infrastructure from AWS. So for those of you who are familiar with cloud and the infrastructure in cloud, AWS has its EC2 instances, Azure has its own as well, and GCVE. So what we did 4 years ago was build our software stack on top of the EC2 framework. And we came up with a joint solution, which is basically a managed service managed by VMware, but running on EC2 infrastructure. So again, if you're familiar with the EC2 paradigms in the EC2 world, we support a couple of instances today, and that's a whole different discussion in itself where we talk about integration with AWS. Now, as the business started maturing, our customers started talking about this managed service that VMware runs on AWS. If you are familiar with VMware, the foundational pieces are vSphere, vSAN, NSX, which comprises the compute, storage, and network. But historically, we have always offered vSAN, which is the HCI component of VMware. And what we do is we package all of it, we manage the whole lifecycle management, and we run on different hardware that is provided by AWS. Now, as the business started picking up and customers started consuming VMware cloud services on AWS, one of the biggest pain points that came out was, of course, disaggregate storage. Now, disaggregate storage in itself is not a new concept. If you, again, going back to what the cloud providers do today, they have their own disaggregate storage. AWS has its EVS, the GCVE and AVS, and all of those folks have their own cloud block storage, right? So whereas BMC historically has offered local storage powered by vSAN. So the ability for customers to have the same flexibility and the same independence to measure up EC2 capacity or VMware cloud services independent of the storage started coming up more quickly on the cloud services front than if I were to say on the on-premises side. This is disaggregate storage has been quite predominant on-premises, I would say. So that's what led us to rethink this whole strategy. We have a good HCI story. We have a good managed service story. Now, how do we offer disaggregate storage? And that's where NetApp comes in. And in the next few slides, AJ is going to set the base for what they did with AWS as well and how we all three came together. And then I'll talk about logistics of where we are with the offering and what you can do to consume it.
So with the challenges that Susie explained, that how customers needed storage that was disaggregated and that could scale independently of capacity, performance, as well as compute. So let me give a quick refresher on how NetApp and VMware came together to do this and why, right? So we have been working together for more than 20 plus years. And the main reason was that as server virtualization took off from 2005 onwards, and so there were phases of growth in there. So over these years, NetApp has been a co-design partner for various pioneering VMware technologies, such as when they introduced vVols, or when for the scalable arrays, VASA providers, as well as now coming all the way forward, it's NVMe with TCP, as well as NFS v4.1, and now with cloud supplemental data store. And that's what we are going to walk through today. So while doing this, also as a market leader and a pioneer in NFS, NetApp ONTAP is the #1 platform for integrated with VMware, where most customers run their virtualized environments today. So as we have been working on these joint integrations, co-design partnerships, as well as providing value to customers. So if you look at it over the years, so initially it was just supporting different protocols, but then it was really about integrating into vCenter through plugins, through VAI and Vasa APIs, and creating within data centers and moving VMs around along with the storage underneath and the volumes underneath. So all of these became pretty much de facto standards where virtualization admins, database admins, storage admins, and now cloud admins, without getting deep into all these broad technologies, they could actually run it all together. So that's the main thing here, that all of these 20+ years of expertise, knowledge of working together, building these plugins, helping customers do these things with as in a simple manner as possible. So that's what we really brought to bear as we worked on, hey, how do we make these things happen now in AWS, for example. So looking at that, so here VMware manages and runs workloads, and NetApp manages and handles the data underneath for all of these workloads. And the premise remains the same, that hey, given all this, irrespective of what workloads these are, whether these are traditional workloads on premises, these are container-based Kubernetes applications with persistent storage, or these are now working in cloud. And how do you move across all of these and go back and forth? So now with the stage setup, we are going to walk you through one particular example of this, that VMware Cloud on AWS with NetApp FSx ONTAP. So how the whole thing comes together and how you can do things today that were not possible before. So here is the high level architecture, and Susie can walk you through that.
Okay. So the next two slides, I'd quickly introduce you to the very high level architectures like AJ mentioned, and then we'll talk about what is available, and then he has a really cool demo to show you all. So what does this slide tell you? So as the left-hand side of the slide indicates, you see the topmost box which talks about VMware Cloud on AWS. Those were the aspects that I had talked briefly to a couple of slides ago. So we combine our whole VMware software stack, and it runs as a managed service on AWS. And then what we have done is all the good work that NetApp has done with AWS and offered FSx. So FSx, there are different flavors of it, by the way. So if you go into AWS storage page, there would be FSx for Lustre, there would be FSx for a couple more choices, and then you will find something that's called FSx N. N stands for NetApp ONTAP. So that basically, what it does is very simple. Just you're able to mount a file onto your existing VMware Cloud on AWS environment. Clusters, basically. Again, a little bit of jargon from the cloud world. The SDDC that you may have heard from the VMware aspects, that still holds good on VMware Cloud on AWS, and you can set up clusters within it. And all you have to do is mount the FSxN data stores onto these clusters. And it's the same way you are familiar with in mounting file system. There is nothing different or new about it. then that was one of the aspects that is preserved from your experience on premise. The same operating model. How do you mount it? How do you manage it? It's the same way. Now, a couple of key points to point out that is highlighted on the right-hand side. If you notice, the capacity is not an issue. You get quite a scalable amount of flash capacity. And your data storage as well, it's in the petabytes. So capacity in itself is not even a deciding factor or even a conversation starter with many of you, all right? However, the SLA aspects is something that you will want to keep in mind. So that 99.99% availability. So what is different from NetApp running on premise versus the cloud is we have something called as availability zones or AZs in short. Now, you get it in two ways. For customers who want to have multiple levels of availability, usually what they do is they run it across different zones. Think of it as multiple sites in on-premise. Now, likewise, FSxN can be deployed as multiple zones environment, or you can do it as a single AZ as well. And what NetApp does is it offers you SLOs, SLAs for that data stores based on the zones that you have set it up. So it is 4 nines for multiple zones, and you can have at most 3 zones. Typically, customers do 2 zones. For VMware Cloud on AWS, we have seen customers start with a single zone, and then once they figure out that a dual multi-zone aspect gives them high availability, then they quickly move over to AZ, to availability zones setup. And then the final point is, again, keeping with the simplicity story and what you're familiar with, and to preserve that familiarity, all the storage efficiencies and the way you would deploy them on premise, we offer that. So this is where this 3-way partnership comes. The storage policies, any kind of compression, dedupe efficiencies that you benefit from on premise, you can have the same thing in the cloud as well. Now, if the questions are, okay, you are an on-premise NetApp customer, you do have certain workloads that you've been wanting to move to the cloud, now you can, right? You come to VMware, we'll give you migration tools. We will give you assessment tools that will tell you how to migrate certain VMs, what would be the best destination for it. However, your data that is there in NetApp will be there in NetApp as well in the cloud. So we truly believe that this 3-way partnership is going to make it really easy and also entice you to adopt NetApp, be it on premise or on the cloud. And to that effect, what we did was we did a rough paper napkin calculation, if you will, to give you a sense of where you will most likely be in terms of TCO. Now, to understand this, you would have to somewhat have an understanding of how you will run the same VMs in the VMware Cloud on AWS. So let me talk about this left side pillar here. So that is without a disaggregate storage, which means you're consuming VMware Cloud on AWS with local storage, which is vSAN, and you're consuming AWS and the infrastructure that we support to run the VMware stack. Whereas if you look at the comparison bar, that is with FSx as disaggregate storage. So that basically gives you an idea that for the same number of VMs and for the same amount of storage, if you were to actually separate it out from local storage and offer it as a disaggregate storage, you get the most bang for the buck, most TCO. Now, having said that, right, you got to take this slide with a grain of salt. You'd have to, based on your workloads, you'd have to do a trade-off between having local storage versus the freedom and the flexibility you get to scale storage independent, right? For example, if you're thinking, why would I ever use this, right? See, if you have workloads where only storage capacity grows, FSXN is probably the right choice for you. Yeah.
Can I ask a question comes to mind that if you remember from the vSAN days, having a synchronous mirror between the two availability zones, one of the big topics that came up was, if I replicate all that data to the other side, and when it's like so many terabytes, I'm going to also pay for the egress charges from one availability zone to the other.
Yeah.
And that was going to be a fair amount, right? Given like obviously proportional to the amount of data when we're talking like 45 terabytes, for example. And then that cost was dropped eventually. Are you doing, is that the same going to happen here as well? Or do we need to take that cost into account as well?
Yeah, very good question. And for those of you who couldn't hear the question, if you have multiple AZs and you're really using NetApp FSXN across multiple AZs to have a active-active setup, in AWS, we used to have something called as egress charges, which means if you're moving data from one AZ to the other, the customer would have to pay. So the question is, does that hold true here as well? So no. So we removed all egress charges as part of VMware Cloud on AWS. So with FSXN, you will inherit that benefit because we do understand that egress charges can amount to be quite a lot at the end of the month. And you look at the bill and you'll get a shocker. So no, we are well aware of it. Now, one other aspect on this TCO that I was talking about is there are benefits to having local storage as well, right? For example, if your workloads are very latency sensitive, you may want to put those VMs on local storage and move the others to FSXN. What we are starting to see actually is customers having those. They have a few handful of VMs that are very latency sensitive, which would remain on a few hosts with local storage. And for all others, they would move over to an FSXN-based storage. And to that effect, both can coexist. So we support FSXN mounted volumes onto clusters that also has local storage. So you have that choice as to select which VMs, which workloads need to remain on premise that is powered by, local, that is powered by vSAN versus which ones you can move to a disaggregate storage. And I'll, before handing it over to AJ, a couple of points. This is now available as a transactable solution. Both NetApp can transact on it, we can transact on it. You can reach out to either of your sales, reach out to NetApp sales and ask them about FSXN in the cloud, or reach out to VMware, and we are all one big family here, so we should be able to assist you with that.
Hi, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
You're implying there that the costs are around, what, 30%?
That's correct, yes.
That on,
yeah.
Just judging from that graph.
Yep.
Just to clarify, you're talking about running workloads on a workload domain in the Cloud Foundation stack there, providing that storage through with FSX for ONTAP. Is that additional to the existing storage in a node?
Correct.
So
that's
you have
correct.
to buy the existing storage with the current nodes?
You're
adding on additional storage versus replacing the vSAN storage on a production.
Okay, so good question. So when you purchase the VMware Cloud on AWS, that one price you get vSAN with it and local storage with it. Yes, you can start just with that. You can start your VMs on it. And then if you feel that that local storage is not enough, then you can add FSXN volumes to that same hosts and clusters.
Okay, so it's more the value add here is that if you're still okay for compute and RAM and you need additional storage, you don't have to buy more nodes.
That's correct, yes. Yeah. That's the biggest advantage you will have. Today, many of the complaints is, oh, I just need, 10 terabytes more, and then you want me to buy, 6 more hosts. That doesn't make sense.
Okay.
This solves that problem.
And how does the performance compare? You know, are there multiple tiers of policies?
Yes, there is.
By varying levels of performance within this?
Yeah, so in FSxN has multiple levels, tiers of performance. So you can, based on your IOPS, bandwidth, capacity. So, and I'll show you in the demo some of the options to do that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I'll hand it over to AJ for the demo. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So let's walk through the demo. Okay. So what you're going to see here is first in VMC. Okay, let me just pause it. Okay, so what you're going to see here is this is actually the entire environment. So we are going to walk through many of these steps. So on the left here is what VMC in AWS looks like. So you see a whole bunch of VMs there. You see the vSAN data store, as well as the FSx supplemental data store there. So we'll start from scratch and build all that. Then on the right side, all the way to the far right, it's the customer's on-prem data center, where they have vSphere running along with ONTAP data storage underneath with volumes mounted in there. And what you see in between is that how do you provision FSxN in cloud, get the supplemental data store set up, and then how to set up replication relationship between on-prem and VMC, and actually move some VMs from on-prem to cloud. So let's walk through that. So initially, what you see here is first deploy an SDDC from the VMC console. And then you are going to see two hosts in there. And yeah, and you can see some of the blurbs here in the balloons. So and I have speeded up a little bit. So once it is done, okay. So then we go, and here is how you pick. So what Susie was saying earlier, that there are multiple flavors of FSx. So you pick FSx NetApp in there, and now you can pick capacity, performance tier, and the IOPS tier that you want to get in there. So after picking those things, then set up the VPC in there, as we saw in the diagram earlier. And then set up the volume configuration here. It is important to note down because this is NFS, the junction path and the IP address. We are going to need that later. So the storage virtual machines, that's the NetApp concept, how we set those up, even whether it's on-prem or in cloud. So once those are set up, so we are going to create two more volumes in there. The third volume we will use later for replicating data from on-prem to cloud. So yeah, so note down the NFS endpoint and the junction path, because when we mount these data stores in VMC as a supplemental data store, you will see that right in there. So then we go into vCenter, and you can actually see these data stores there. So as Susie said, it's in initial availability right now. We can transact on it, and we support 4 data stores in there. So you can see here the data store 1, and you can see the VMs over there. So the NFS data store is mounted there, and now we have multiple data stores in there. So let's set up the on-prem SnapMirror replication. So this is the Cloud Manager interface that Chuck walked through earlier. So same way here, through Cloud Manager, we discover both the on-prem environment as well as the FSxN system So basically those environments are added. SnapMirror replication is set up between those. And that is as simple as just dragging and dropping. So you have the data source and the data target. And once those are set up in there, so replication will take some time depending on how many terabytes of data we are actually moving. So once that is done, so while that is happening, it's a read-only relationship on VMC with FSXN. So that's broken. And when you want to actually fail over there, that becomes a read-write. And then once that becomes a read-write, that data store is available. And then we go register the VMs out of that. And once you register the VM, after it becomes read-write, then we can actually go in and log into those. So you'll see that happening here. So this is the data store 03 that we had set up earlier, the third volume I talked about. So here the VMs are getting registered, and now you can see those. And so basically register, deploy, provision, and mount, and you guys can get going with it now today. So in closing, I want to end with a quote from Susie's colleague, Narayan Bharadwaj, the VP of Cloud Services at VMware, that today NetApp is the only cloud storage service provider, and you guys can read it, to be certified and become supported for use as an external supplemental data store for VMware cloud environments running in the largest public clouds. So what you saw was VMC with AWS FSXN. Similar to that in Azure, we have Azure NetApp Files ANF running with AVS. So that's the Azure VMware solution. And that's in public preview currently as well. And the solution in Google with GCVE and NetApp CVS over there, that's in private preview. So all of these three environments are there. And like I said, what you saw here was not only how simple it becomes, but how flexible it is, that you can move, you can do DR there, you can save costs. And with that, thank you. And we'll be happy to take on any questions, discussions. Thanks.
Well, every time I see that presentation, I'm kind of like blown away at just the depth of that integration, the partnership. So thank you so much, Susie, for being here. Before we kind of jump into the Q&A with all our presenters, and I'll get them to come up and sit in here so we can talk to them. I just want to get one more reaction from you guys. How did you like those demos, and how do you feel? Well, let me ask this way. Do you believe that the hybrid cloud can be simple, secure, and flexible? What's your kind of reaction to that, having seen our presentation today? Karen is smiling, so thank you, Karen.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it can be. I think we're still a ways off, so I applaud the effort to get there and the focus on that, because I think, you know, IT goes through these waves of we increase the complexity and then we got to bring it back together. And I think we're in that approach to making it simpler. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a good focus.
And I was smiling because I was thinking about those were kind of absolute words. So I think simpler, more flexible, more secure is what I would vote for, but not more secure than just single cloud, right? So I'm not against complexity. I just think everything comes down to cost, benefit, and risk. And I personally wouldn't intentionally choose to use all the clouds just because I could. I don't think anyone else here would, but I think that as someone who kind of works a lot in one cloud provider, and when I have to switch over to another, I have to do all that translation and forget about all these other things I have to do, that certainly having something that goes over the top of everything to help me manage it and help me make sure that I'm not forgetting a security thing, that's going to be helpful for me.
Yeah, and I want to point out as well, the thing that I love as well as a person who uses different clouds is that it is the flexibility and it's that choice. You're not kind of forced into, you have to use everything, you have to do it this way, you have to have this level of security. It's a choice, and it's and we're working with our customers and our partners to get there. So let's jump in for questions, and maybe if we could do we get the delegates up here, the presenters up here? So. All right, questions? Are there any thoughts about it?
I have one, and so I saw one sort of brief mention about costing, and one of my worries as a data engineer is that some of these things kind of hide how expensive a certain deployment or use of cloud, which I know we've all been burnt in the past by either over provisioning or those sorts of things, or forgetting to turn things off even. So how do I balance that, the flexibility and the simplicity of having all of these tools to manage cloud and multi-cloud and hyper-cloud situations with not me as the person architecting something, not burning myself with cost? You know, that's a constant trade-off, right?
Yeah, good question. And because it's funny, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from IT ops and cloud ops people that my app dev and my DevOps people will over provision a giant machine because they want to get the work done. And I end up with all these giant machines. And so that's one of the reasons we're really trying to come at it from two primary directions, because we can't control the cost of a hyperscaler's cloud resource. They charge what they charge for a VM or a gigabyte per month of storage. So the two areas we're trying to come at it. Number one, we're trying to come at it from optimization of the resource, from a storage equation, compression, compaction, dedupe, and tiering. You've seen us bring all of those. Those are technologies that evolved in the data center over decades. You now have that in the cloud. You can have infrequently used data tiered off to super cheap cold archive, for example, under a single namespace, so that when the application asks for it, it gets it, just takes a little longer. That's an example we're doing at the infrastructure layer. Also on the compute side, with the reason we've invested so greatly in Spot and Cloud Checker, et cetera, so the customer knows what they're having and they can have resources delivered on demand at a fraction of the list price if they can use Spot or reserved instances, as an example. But the second way we're coming at it, and it has to do with the automation and the integration and the policy-based deployment. One of the things I showed in the demo, I'm a DevOps guy. I've got that profile. I sign on and I want to create a 50 gig NFS volume for me to use for my DevOps. I'm going to have a template presented to me that's going to use this VM instead of this VM. It may take me longer because my company has decided that's what I'm going to do. It may have restrictions on what services I can turn on for it, because those are all charged and based, et cetera. And then we'll tie back into some of the other reporting to end up, is it stale? Has it been out there for a long time? Has it not been used? Do you want to release this? Those are kind of the areas we're trying to come at it, because it's a problem. It's a very real problem that exists in the world. And we think you've got to come at it from a number of different angles. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And I was hoping to hear the policy-based thing as being a contributor to that, because, you know, like, I'm going to say it's my developers, but sometimes it's me. It's like, yeah, throw 50 nodes at this data warehouse that I'm playing with in a prototype, and that's expensive.
Right. A question. Oh, sorry. Were you going to answer a bit more?
I was going to say, just because I'm the statistics girl here, that Karen, you're absolutely right, because what we found is that 30% of cloud spend is overspend. So that, you know, another reason why these are the things that we look at, and Chuck and his team are trying to figure out, you know, how do we help reduce that with the tools?
Keep that mic. Next question might go to you.
Okay, next question.
Could be, although it's about the VMware Cloud on AWS. So the last bit that we did. So I was, first of all, wondering if the performance tiers available, are there performance tiers I think that's what you discussed as well, that 4.4, that's FSX on ONTAP. Yeah. So are they identical to the cloud volume service that you normally provide? Are they the same performance tiers, or is there a difference between them?
So they are similar. They are not exactly identical. So I have a mic. Yeah. So what you see with FSX versus what you see with ANF on Azure versus what you see with CVS in Google. So we have the standard performance, and then as we need more IOPS per gigabyte, then you go to higher and higher tiers. So one of the things we can do is that without having to reformat or redo anything, you can instantly change between these tiers as your application needs go up and down. And that flexibility is important also, that while I'm running SAP HANA and doing something throughout the day, then I need the extreme level of performance. Then at night, if I'm running backups, doing some cloning, then I can lower those tiers. So you can actually do those up and down, but we do offer those. And of course, it depends on which hyperscaler it is, because the nomenclature is slightly different on these tiers, and the pricing is slightly different also.
And exactly, that's exactly why I'm asking that question, because you typically put workloads on it, and sometimes there are multiple workloads on the same data store, right? So how do you manage that? Is that something that automatically scales and lets you know about the pricing, or do you have to change it manually? How does that process work? And can you deliver performance of any, say, HANA, for example, on FSX?
So there's kind of two questions. I think there's one other thing I wanted to say, which is that usually when you are doing these migrations from virtualization into a cloud, even if you're just going from a VM into an EC2 instance, there's that process of right sizing afterwards, because you only know how well it operates in that one environment. And so part of the flexibility is making an educated guess, some sort of estimate, running some POCs, and then going, okay, let's tune it once we get there. So that's the other way you'd use that. And in terms of the level of performance, I mean, we do see, I don't know if we've got all the certifications, but we definitely have workloads that are in the highest performance tiers running on these platforms, and being able to deliver that level of performance that those applications are asking for. And that's kind of what you're thinking about, is migrating the enterprise level applications, the large, heavy, performant applications from on-premises to run in cloud native. And now, yes, absolutely you can. And we are seeing a lot of our customers doing that across different clouds.
Yeah, because what I also heard in the question is, if I'm using FSX and VMC or ANF and AVS, are they the pricing tiers that I know and I'm used to, and I can check on a website, is it the same pricing, or are you creating special pricing? That's what I heard.
Yeah.
We're not creating special pricing. So what we're doing is making sure that FSX can be a shared external data store with VMC, for example, or if you look in the Azure world, ANF and AVS, and they are the standard tiers that you can look at and know, and you might have been using for other workloads, and you've been waiting for the ability to use that as an external shared data store, and we're not creating artificial layers. We're trying to reduce the complexity, not increase the complexity. When you get, AJ talked about the auto scaling, or auto performance scaling, we think that reduces the complexity, but it's still between the standard tiers.
Yeah. Also, there are pretty elaborate TCO and sizing calculators that VMware and NetApp have worked together along with hyperscalers to make sure that depending on what your environments are, what your use cases are, workflows are, how to size it right, and what the cost estimates would be. So those things are all available, as well as being worked on and improved.
Yeah, thank you. And your question, I mean, obviously I was talking from both cost and performance point of views, both. So one last question, quick one, because I wasn't quite clear in the end about what was the answer to the inter-availability zone traffic. Are we dropping that price already, or have we dropped that cost already, or we are thinking about it? I wasn't clear on that.
The egress?
Yeah, so inter-availability zone costs for the data
that
transfer.
has been removed for quite a while, actually. We don't carry that anymore.
But that's what's for vSAN specifically.
No. That is for any VMware Cloud on AWS setup. regardless of whether you have the local storage or the external storage. We just do not expose the egress charges any longer to the customer. There are egress charges, by the way. We incur the cost of it.
No. Exactly. It's also my concern obviously was about the data storage side of things, because this is a new service, or as far as I know it is.
It is a new service, yes.
So does that apply? And it does.
Yeah, but you won't be able to see that in your monthly billing, or even if you purchase it as an RI, you're not going to see it.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, that you can buy reserved instances, you can do on demand, you can sign a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year subscriptions. So the pricing changes accordingly. And then we internally, even for our engineering teams and dev teams, I mean, we have to manage costs, right, for all of these.
I actually wanted to add a point to your question. See, I don't know if you caught those steps in the demo that AJ was showing. You do have an ability to choose the throughput that you can then decide which one is more apt for your workloads. Now, throughput becomes a big deal, of course, as you know, because you're going to have to connect the VPCs across, right? Meaning, if you're familiar with how VMC on AWS works, you connect the shadow VPC to the AWS VPC. So you want the best throughput there as well. So it is not so much as just the tiers within the data stores, but you want to pair it with the most appropriate throughput band that will make sense for the workloads. And those steps actually lets you do that. You can play around with it and see what the total cost is, how much of SSDs you would need. For example, sometimes you may need all 100% flash, right? So you play around with that tool a bit, and you will find out that the extreme most costly would be an 100% flash with 2048 megabits throughput.
Right.
And that's your high end. And then your low end would be, 256 meg of throughput and, almost less than 20% of flash. So you can play around with those tiers. Now, I also detected a different kind of question in your overall picture. Are you also looking at scenarios where you start with a certain tier, and then as your usage grows, you're expecting us to automatically move you to the next tier?
Yeah, it was partly that if you are doing it, I mean, not necessarily, I mean, if it's automatic, as long as the customer knows about what the cost implication would be, and then approves it or something, and it automatically moves to that tier, that could be a use case. Although I understand that because they are based on data store levels, then you change the performance tier for the data store, right? So
yeah, but if you are consuming it as an on-demand, you can change it. But if you purchase reserved subscription,
then
you're fixed in that reserved subscription.
Of course, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, and then the storage efficiencies that Chuck showed in the cloud manager, they all apply for FSx and dedupe compression and how much data is there. You can even tier it down further to S3, all those things.
Any other questions about the VMware service or the and the integration with FSxN?
So I had a question.
I'll just go real quick. Sorry about that. So just for my edification, is this fully available with Azure VMware solution as well, or are we talking about just VMware Cloud?
So this is, we have a public preview with Azure VMware solution, but that's with Azure NetApp files. So obviously the architecture that we showed you today was for VMware Cloud, and we obviously understand that the Azure VMware solution is a different architecture. We didn't show that, but in terms of how we're integrating, it's the same way.
Just a minor nitpick. When you say VMware Cloud, Azure is also VMware Cloud. So what we showed today was a managed service running on AWS only. However, NetApp being the real Switzerland here, they have the same FSxN services running on Azure VMware service. That is what we refer to as AVS in short form, but it's the same three pillars, except instead of AWS, it's Azure.
With Azure NetApp Files.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the managed file service in Azure from NetApp is Azure NetApp Files. Yeah, nomenclature is one of those things that differentiates us between clouds too.
I want to go back to the report that you were showing, and I just wanted to ask, when is that report going to be publicly available so we can like look through it?
Probably the end of this week.
Okay.
If not early next week. Yeah, we're just putting the final finishing touches on like, the formatting and the creative. If you want to just, let's connect afterwards and I'll
Sure.
get your contact info and share
Was-
it when we have it.
Was there anything else about the report that you found particularly interesting? Because I think you ran out of time a little bit and probably had a little more to say about it. So
I did. And actually one of the things, I wanted to tell you guys about the use cases that we saw. Because, when it comes to moving data, why are customers moving data? And it was interesting to see the results of this report because, I had been doing I had different discussions with different customers about how they're using hybrid cloud. And DR and backup had always been like a primary use case because I think that that's just the most readily understood. But this study that we did showed that actually analytics came out as number one. And then I started looking at, well, actually, that makes sense because if you look at a couple of the examples that I provided, like with the F1 team from Aston Martin, and then also Dow Jones, those are all about analytics. So like the more that I started looking at other, case studies and customer stories that we had, I'm like, yeah, actually, analytics, I can see that. So, which is interesting because, even you talk to the analysts and they'll tell you, oh yeah, well, DR and backup is the primary use case for hybrid cloud. And the others, are really far behind, but this showed that that wasn't so. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah, I've run into that actually pretty often where they're either shipping data between clouds or from on-prem to the cloud because that's where the big analytics engines are. And if you don't want to pay to have a whole data center full of servers that are just crunching numbers, send it up to the cloud. That's kind of what it's there for. And then you don't have to pay the egress charge to bring it back down because you did all your analysis up there.
Exactly. And we have some large financial customers that do exactly that. And, and that actually matched up with what we saw in terms of frequency. Because if you see, like monthly, quarterly, because they're doing reporting, on certain intervals. So it's not necessarily a daily thing or, a weekly thing, but just, in intervals. So, yeah, it's kind of cool to look at.
I wanted to go back as well, just on that point to something Karen was talking about, Cloud Data Sense earlier. And I just wanted to point out one of the reasons I think we move towards more of the data insight, like what is your data, where is your data, who's accessing your data, is for that reason, because one of the key workflows that Data Sense now enables is you can see what all your data is, beyond just it's a volume containing some files, but what are those files, whose are those files, and choose what you want to move. And it automates some of that process of, okay, I want to move these kinds of files into a different volume or into the cloud. And so that means that you're not transferring data that you don't have to. And I think that's part of that, you think about how much data there is, and it's easy to just go, yeah, move everything, but that takes a long time. So yeah, when that becomes this monthly, weekly kind of schedule, you want to be a little bit more specific about what data is being moved.
Yeah, and then Cloud Data Sense is even more powerful that not only it can look at data that's in ONTAP anywhere, but also data that's in many other places. So data that's in S3 or some of the SaaS applications, and not just the data in ONTAP. So user activity and data classification across those things, it can track those.
And identify what is in those files.
Right.
Is it sensitive data that shouldn't be backed up or protected or moved, that needs to stay within certain geographies based upon regulatory requirements?
Yeah, because actually with some of these, not the demo I was showing, but there is a corollary of that where Cloud Data Sense actually scans the VMs or the data that's moving to cloud and make sure it's okay to move that data store to cloud, and there is no personally identifiable or whatever flags the customer may have set up policies with. So it can actually act as a filter and screen that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to your point earlier, we were talking, thinking about what makes it more simple or more flexible or more secure. I think it's some of those workflows that we're trying to enable rather than trying to just make the technology simple, right? I mean, we can abstract out all the complexity that we want, but it's the workflows that people are actually trying to do with that we're trying to simplify or build policies around. I don't know, does that resonate with you guys? Is that something that you want to see more of, or?
Very much so, because to your point, taking out steps of, the simple processes of, provisioning storage or moving things around or whatever it is, can only go so far. And for the most part, I feel like a lot of that has been pretty well simplified. So I love that you called that out, that what are the next steps? What can we do with this data now that we have it? How can we manage it better? How do we get it to go different places with minimal effort? Is definitely a part of that simplification piece that we need in the multi-cloud. So for me, I would say yes, absolutely.
I totally agree. So sometimes in technology, right, it's because we can, but we forget why are we doing this. It's not because we have, well, I mean, it's fun, but engineering, well, we're doing it to serve the business lines, usually to accomplish business. And the workflows plays a much bigger role where you, to your point, right, I have policies, protected data. This is something that still, in my opinion, can be simplified and more across the whole organization, right? So you have a bunch of island solutions sometimes. This has this policy, this has this policy. And I dream of being easier, having it more adapt to the workflow, right? Okay, so accounting does this versus accounting trying to work around a solution that, in this case, NetApp or someone else would provide, is a more centralized policy model behind it. And the technology adapts to the workflow versus the workflow adapts to technology. I think we still have some room for improvement there for sure.
Yeah, awesome. All right, any last questions or comments? Okay. All right, we're going to wrap up. Thank you all for listening to us and watching our demos and asking us these great questions. Thank you to all our presenters today as well. And of course, I've been on Twitter, so let's keep this conversation going, either online or offline on email and DM. I'd love to. I think it's a really fun one. Thank you, Stephen.
All right, over to me. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us. I feel weird standing in front of you, but I will do it anyway. Thanks everyone for joining us here. It's been great having NetApp back. As you can see, as I said at the beginning, this is a whole new NetApp. If you've been following this company for a long time, wow, yeah, a lot of different stuff going on here. So it's been great catching up with NetApp. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do hop on over to LinkedIn. You'll be able to see the live recording of everything in case you missed anything, basically as soon as I'm stopped talking. And we'll also be posting recordings of this session to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube/TechFieldDay, and you'll find recordings of all of the Cloud Field Day sessions, including this one, in just a couple of days. You can also find lots and lots of recordings of previous sessions. So there was some great folks from the NetApp side chiming in on Twitter during this, and there's a lot of great content from that as well. Or just go to your friendly neighborhood Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo and look for NetApp and Field Day, and you'll find lots and lots of videos from the past where you can help fill in some of the knowledge. We'll be back at 1:30 Pacific time, which is about an hour and a half, according to my watch. So please do join us for the final presentation of day one of Cloud Field Day. And also we'll be back tomorrow and Friday with more of Cloud Field Day as well. So please join us for that. So for now, let's go ahead and take down the stream.